So I've got a few things I wanted to talk about tonight that have to do with just day-to-day radon test placement. And some of the things are covered in the standard, but sometimes you run across things that aren't clearly defined. And so I thought we could talk about some of those. I hope you brought some questions because um, you'll have an opportunity if you'd like to ask. You run into situations that perhaps you're not quite sure, do I place it here, do I place it there, or you're having a problem with getting the kind of response from your real estate agents or your sellers or buyers, whatever that you're working on. So please feel free to put your questions in the chat box, and AJ is going to help me get to them all. So the first thing I actually wanted to address has to do with the minimum requirements for efforts to verify test conditions. And this comes from the ANSI standard, and you may or may not be certified through ANSI. You may not be certified at all. Maybe you're licensed through a state that has a licensing program. Maybe you are in a state that doesn't require certification. If that's the case, I hope you'll consider becoming NRPP or NRSB certified. If you go to the EcoSense website, ecosense.io, we've got courses there. InterNACHI has courses for you to get your certification. So be sure that you take advantage of having the credential needed for doing radon testing and providing that credibility that you'll need with your clients. So coming from the standard itself, whoops, sorry, I just came right out of my, there we go. There we go. So according to the standards, it says that the tester shall inform the responsible person of the required test conditions, that the tester shall post notification of a radon test in progress sign or notice in a conspicuous location, stating the required test conditions. And this is one that I wanted to take a moment to at least address. The tester shall request a signature on a non-interference agreement and note in the report whether the document was actually signed. And finally, the tester shall conduct visual inspections that evaluate observed conditions, document any deviations from the protocol, and any temporary conditions that might affect the result. And you're to do this both when you place the test device and when you come to retrieve it. So as I mentioned, I want to talk about this third bullet, the non-interference agreement, for just a minute. So on this slide, you can see over on the left, there's a sample non-interference agreement that comes straight from the ANSI radon measurement and home standard. And it's a template for you to create your own. And of course, there's also a radon test in progress door hanger, which you can create your own. You can have a printer make them and put your information on them as well, or you can buy them pre-made. And then over on the right, there's a copy of what I like to call an authorization agreement. So I call it a radon test authorization and non-interference agreement. So the idea here is that you're going to get someone to acknowledge with a signature that they agree, well, first of all, that they understand the test conditions and they agree to abide by them. I hear all the time where inspectors will place this on the counter, and if no one is at the property, then when they retrieve the test device, the document is still sitting there, and obviously no one signed it. So in today's technology world, it's not difficult to send these out in advance. So I really urge you to consider getting these out via email. And who do you send it to? Well, you can send it to your client, the buyer. I would make an effort to send it to the seller, which you may have to request information on who that is and how you can reach them, or the seller's agent or the buyer's agent. Send it to all of them if need be, but just let them know that you need a signature from someone who's going to take some responsibility for the property, that they understand the test conditions and agree to abide by it. Now, in the event you're thinking this sounds a little unreasonable, if the property's vacant, for example, the agreements are clear, and if you look at the one that we have, it does say that within reason, that you're going to take measures to maintain these test conditions within reason. So if you're looking at sending it to a real estate agent, no, we're not expecting them to sit there and monitor the windows for 48 hours or more, but they do have control of the lockbox, and there are frequently contractors coming in and out of the property to do other things to get it ready for a sale, and it would be prudent for that real estate agent to make sure that those contractors or other people entering the property, maybe it's another real estate agent still showing it, understand there's a test in progress, and they will give them either a heads up that they need to maintain closed house conditions, or perhaps in the event it's a contractor needing to do work, that they reschedule it for after the test is completed. So if you send these out in advance, my experience is that you can get them signed. There are some states that require these to be signed. Illinois was one of the first states that requires it. And I remember when that happened many years ago, that testers were complaining about, well, this is going to be really difficult. People resist signing them and so forth. You're not going to be successful, even in a state like that, when it's required every time. And they don't expect that you're going to be 100% successful in getting the signatures, but they do expect that you're making a sincere effort 100% of the time. And if you are in a state where they do audits, then you could get a little slap on the wrist if it looks like most of the tests you're conducting don't have a signed authorization agreement. So I would suggest you get these out in advance, and then let me tell you why it's important, other than just the protocol says it or the state requires it. My experience from many years ago, and from talking to inspectors for many years since, is if you don't get a signed agreement, then if you show up and to retrieve the test and the device it has been moved a little bit, or the windows are open, or it's obvious that there's been some tampering, then the typical response, if there's not an agreement signed, is, well, we didn't understand. We didn't understand it needed to be there the entire 48 hours. I thought they said 4 to 8 hours. Or we didn't understand you meant all of the windows. We just thought you meant the windows on the lowest level. Or whatever they want to respond, they're not going to take responsibility. So then there's going to be a client looking at you and saying, well, now what do we do? The test results are unreliable because the windows were open during the test, for example. And there's going to be an expectation that you're going to come back and perform another test for no charge. I don't think any of us like to do work for free. So the way to avoid that is to make a sincere effort to get these out in advance, and hopefully get the signatures back even before you show up to perform the test. I like to call them authorization agreements. It's a little less, I don't know, maybe confrontational is not the word, but to me, if I were the seller and you sent me a notice that calls it a non-interference agreement, then I would think, well, what is it that makes you think I'm going to cheat on the test? I'm trustworthy, so forth. If you call it an authorization agreement, and within the authorization agreement, and with that authorization, they're giving you assurance that they understand the required test conditions and agree to abide by them, then perhaps it's a little easier for everybody to follow through and get it done. So just a heads up on that. If you'll make an effort, I think you'll find you'll be successful, and you won't have as many tests where you have to consider, well, what do we do now because the test conditions weren't maintained. There's another part of the standard that talks about the test conditions, and I highlighted a couple of things here. The thermostat should be set to maintain normal occupied temperatures between 65 and 80 degrees. Well, for the thermostat to do that, then the air handler is going to have to be set to cycle on and off automatically, depending on how low or how high the temperature gets, and which means the power needs to be on in the property. And I hear inspectors tell me, well, I run into a lot of homes where there's no power on, and I think I would do everything I could to make sure, if I were you, that you talk to people in advance as part of the preparation, and let them know, hey, the power really needs to be on for you to do a proper radon test, where you can indeed maintain that temperature between 65 and 80, and then there may be a heat recovery ventilation system, an energy recovery ventilator, something that does cycle some fresh air in as a routine part of that air handling system. That's supposed to be set for the lowest ventilation that occurs for any season. So if there's part of the year where that's completely shut off, then you would set that ventilation to not be on at all during the test. If it's adjusted to allow more air in certain times of the year than others, then again, you want to have it set for the lowest ventilation condition that occurs. So think about that when you're talking to clients about taking that order. That ask some questions. Is the power on in the property, and so forth? If not, when will it be on? Is it temporary power? What's the situation that I'm going to be running into? This is a regulation from Illinois, and I like to bring this up because even though it's required in Illinois, it's good practice no matter where you are. In Illinois, there's a regulation that says short-term or long-term measurements shall be made at the same time in each lowest structural area suitable for occupancy. For example, a split-level building with a basement, a slab-on-grade room, and a room over the crawl space shall have measurements made in each of the foundation types: the basement, a slab-on-grade room, and a room over the crawl space. So the standard says you would test in the lowest level of the home that could be used as a living space. But that doesn't mean you can't sell the importance of testing, for example, in a room above the adjacent crawl space, or in a room on the adjacent slab addition. And the interesting thing about this is, for the 20 some odd years that this has been a requirement in Illinois, they've gathered data where they can see the test results in the multiple foundation areas. And there have been countless times where, if they had only tested in the basement, for example, then it would have tested low and they would have assumed there was no problem, when in fact a simultaneous measurement in the room over the crawl space or in a room over the slab showed elevated levels. So it's a good practice. And I think a lot of home inspectors don't really think about, bringing this up. We figure, well, they're just going to want the cheapest possible test. One, if they do one, we've done well. I think you'll find clients out there that would appreciate you talking to them about the importance. So again, when you're taking the order, you perhaps would like to talk to them about, well, what kind of foundation does it have? Does it have more than one foundation type? But regardless, be prepared that you may run into that, and if you didn't talk about it in advance, perhaps you could talk about it when you arrive on site. So just to be clear, in this diagram, you can see there's a home with a basement, and if that's a livable basement, then you would certainly want to test there. And then there's a crawl space area adjacent to that, and you would want to test in a room above that crawl space. If over there on the other side of the house, if there had been a slab addition, then you'd want to test in a room above that slab. So I put together a couple of little interesting diagrams, at least that were interesting for me, because I know that you're going to run into these, and you probably have. So in this particular floor plan, you'll see the lower floor, which is in the top right, has a 2-car garage, and then a foyer and stairs that go up to the next level. And the only room on that level is a laundry room. Now, perhaps that laundry room was so big that it also had space for an office, or it also had space for a sewing room, or something that could be occupied and be justified as a suitable place to test. But if it's really just a laundry room, remember, we have a protocol that says, well, yeah, they go there and they do their wash, but that's not a place they spend any significant time. And there's a humidity issue that can be a problem with some detectors. So we wouldn't test there. So in this scenario, the logical place to test would be in that living room, dining room combination, and not test the laundry room. As I mentioned, you're going to find exceptions to that because of certain conditions. If they've already turned that laundry room into a workroom of some sort because it's large enough to do that, well then, okay, you can make a case. When in doubt, and you can talk to your client, the buyer, then that's a good thing to do rather than get into a situation after the fact. But as it's drawn up here, then the protocol would say you would test on the second floor rather than on that lowest level, when the only place other than the garage and the stairwell is a laundry room. Here's another situation where you've got a lower level with a garage and a kitchen, and then it does open into a great room, and then there's a floor above that. So in this situation, you would want to test there in that great room as far away from the kitchen as you can get without being too close to an exterior wall and so forth, all the other requirements you want to maintain. But I have had questions when I've done webinars and classes over the years where someone would say, well, I encountered a home where the lowest level only had the kitchen and a little breakfast area, and then there were stairs that went up to the main living area. So what would I do there if I'm not supposed to test kitchens? Well, the standard says that if you have a situation where you're going to test in a place that's perhaps not exactly what the protocol says, then you need to document why you chose that place. So if it just said kitchen, and you didn't have the area down here that says great room, and it was just a little dining area there, then yeah, it would be suitable to test there. I would get as far away from the cooktop and oven as you could get, and perhaps where they might eat breakfast if there's a breakfast bar or a breakfast nook, and test there, and then document in your test report why you chose to test there. It was the lowest level. That was the most logical place to put it. You avoided humidity from the cooking, and that's why you placed it there. And then you're going to run into all sorts of things, particularly in older houses that have cellars or really rough basements. And so if it were me and I was looking at a situation like you see on the left, I would say, well, they have a washer and dryer there, but the rest of that space looks pretty unlivable. So I would suggest that the test be placed in the room above. Now, you're testing for a buyer, and there's certainly the potential for that buyer to say, well, but I plan to clean that up and put a workout room or something there. And if that's the case, then all right. But I would suggest that you make sure that that's clear to the seller, that the buyer wants to test in that space because they're going to use it in a far different way. And you're not surprised with an argument after the fact that you get sucked into. So if you can document that ahead of time, that would be helpful, get everybody's agreement. Otherwise, I would just go ahead and choose to test upstairs, or if you have an extra test device, then maybe you test both upstairs and in that lowest level. But the protocol would frown, at least the way it's written, on testing a basement like you see there on the left. Now, you get to the right, and it's a little hard to tell, what's behind everything there, but they have done some work to make that livable. And obviously somebody is spending time there. There's a bed, there's a desk, a TV, they put lights down there, a rug on the floor, or something. So it looks like that's a livable space, and someone is indeed living in it. And that would be my justification, if it were me, for testing in that location. So I'm going to take just a short check-in here with AJ. Do we have any questions about anything so far?
So far, we have no questions, Dallas.
Oh, okay. Well, then good. So if you've run across something that is different than what I've gone over, then please ask your question. I'll do my best to answer it. So new construction is always an interesting request. So my experience in dealing with inspectors over the years, when a builder calls you to do a test on a new home, that you ask a lot of questions before you trip out to the house. So I'm going to go to this next slide. And for example, it says for new construction, all openings to the exterior due to incomplete construction or structural defects or disrepair need to be closed or sealed at least 12 hours prior to initiating the test. The heating and cooling system needs to be active and set to a normal occupied temperature. So obviously it needs to be installed and the power needs to be on. All windows and exterior doors need to have been installed with hardware and seals. All insulation and exterior siding needs to have been installed. All wall and ceiling coverings need to have been completed, including interior drywall or paneling. Obviously, if they haven't gotten it all painted yet, then that's a different conversation, but everything needs to be, where it can be enclosed and partitioned like it's going to be. All fireplaces need to have been installed, including the dampers, where the damper can be closed. So again, my experience is when you get to a house that looks a little like this, when you were called out to do the test, you may find that some of those things are not done. You may find, well, there's actually no power in the place, or the hardware is really not on the windows. So I would suggest strongly that if a builder calls you to test a new property, that you or your staff is trained to ask that builder 15 or 20 questions, and even perhaps, are you sure? I know I have been told years ago, I had, would go out and do a test myself, and the builder assured me that everything was done, and then I would get out to the site, and the on-site project manager would look at me like, well, he told you that? Really? No, we haven't gotten that done yet. So just a heads up, no point in making a trip if you don't have to. It's better to ask the questions up front. Here's another situation that is addressed in the standard. Let's suppose you had a building with 4 individually owned condominiums, and 2 on the right, 2 on the left, one stacked over the other. And let's say the owner of that bottom left condominium wants you to perform a radon test. Well, what do you do about closed house conditions? So the standard says that when testing only one or several units of a shared building, like a duplex or townhouse apartment, with occupied units above or below the ones to be tested, closed building conditions are required for all portions of the building, including dwellings above and below the tested unit. So now you're going to have to figure out, perhaps, how you can maintain closed house conditions in the entire building when those other units are in the control of a different owner. So they put an exception in the standard for that situation. It says testing is permitted if closed conditions in the other units are beyond the control of the tester. However, this situation requires that the conditions, circumstances, and appropriate recommendations are described in writing for inclusion with reports when distributed. So the answer to this is, if indeed you have no control over closed conditions in those other units, that you make it clear in your report, anywhere you can put notes. If you're using our equipment, we've got a place where you can put notes to include in the report, and you just describe the situation where it's clear that you cannot verify, or you observed closed conditions weren't maintained in the other units, and that's the best you can do. Now, just to go a step further, if you were hired to characterize the radon in the entire multifamily building, then you're going to follow a different protocol altogether, and that is the ANSI-ARS protocol for testing multifamily and large buildings. If you go to standards.arst.org, standards.arst.org, then you can scroll through and see all of the different ANSI-ARS standards, and you can find the one for multifamily. And all of the standards can be viewed for free. You can't download them or readily search them, but you can certainly open them up and scroll through and read them if you'd like. And you can purchase them if at that same site. I think they're typically around $50. If you are an ARST member, then your membership includes free copies or access. So you'll get the PDF versions for you to download and save on your computer without having to pay additional for them if you are an ARST member. It's good to know if you're not certified, then I would strongly recommend that you consider getting certified. In the meantime, I would definitely make sure that you're familiar with the standard. Spend a little time going through and make sure that you're clear and that you're following the standard and the doing your tests in an appropriate manner. Improper deployment. So let's think about this, and this is something that I think if you consider professionalism in addition to following the standard, then the clown on the left is placing a radon test device on the floor right at the sump. Well, that might be interesting for a mitigator to do some diagnostics, but is not a test suitable for determining whether the home should be mitigated. And then this is commonplace where instead of having a tripod or a stand, a TV tray, something to put the monitor on, a lot of testers just place it right on top of a 5-gallon bucket. Personally, I don't think a 5-gallon bucket looks very professional, but even if it did, a 5-gallon bucket is not a full 20 inches off the floor. I have seen where people put a box on top of the 5-gallon bucket and then put the monitor on top of that. If you have a device that has the ability to connect to a tripod, then I would suggest that looks a lot better, looks more professional. If you go to Amazon, you can find tripods for $12–15. It's not like it's gonna be a heavy burden on your budget, and you'll have them handy for placement and not have to look around for a paint bucket or something to put your test device on. I'm gonna kind of end up with something here, and without getting too much on an advertisement here, but we have a couple of homeowner devices. We have an EcoCube. We also have an EcoBlue, and I invite you to go to our website and look at how they work and how they operate. And you may be asking your self, well, why would I care about homeowner devices? I do professional tests. So here's where I would like you to consider that this is an opportunity for you. So let's suppose you use our Radon I Pro, or you use some other company's professional monitor, and you do a very good 2 or 3 day test. You followed all the protocols, closed house conditions were maintained, and everything was done by the book. But when the test result is generated, the levels fall between 2 and 4 picocuries per liter. The standard says that if the results fall between 2 and 4, the client should consider mitigation. So let me make that clear. If the results are 4 picocuries per liter or higher, then the EPA recommendation says fix the building. If the levels are between 2 and 4, then the recommendation is to consider fixing the building. So if you've seen as much test data as I have over the many years, you know that radon concentrations can vary a lot throughout the day and night. They can vary a lot from week to week, from month to month, and certainly from season to season. So even if you did a great 2-day test it isn't necessarily reflective of what the concentrations are over a longer period. The protocol for testing in real estate transactions enables us to do the best we can in the short time frame that we have for getting the test done and the property evaluated before closing. And thousands and thousands of properties have been tested by home inspectors like yourself, where people have discovered the concentrations were high, and they went ahead and mitigated, and they got benefit from that. So the program is a success. That said, if it fell between 2 and 4, do you really know what it is over the longer period? So here's an opportunity where if you were to join, for example, our referral club, then you would be able to actually sell your client one of our homeowner devices at the lowest price they could buy it at. We'll even discount it to match whatever we have on Amazon and less. So we monitor that, and you can get a commission for doing it. We pay those commissions out every month via PayPal. So I was excited at the InterNACHI conference in Atlantic City last week, where we had one of our inspectors who uses our Radon I Pro run up to me and say, "Hey, I'm ready to buy another Radon I Pro. I made enough money over the years so far selling the homeowner devices that the commission is going to pay for another unit." Now, I can tell you that this home inspector is aggressive in selling them. She makes it very clear to her clients that they really need to have one, and she's passionate about it. But as a result, they trust her, and she sells a lot of those units and makes a commission off them. But more importantly than making the commission is the fact that you're doing a service for your client. You've been clear with them. You've done everything you can within the time constraints before closing, but now they have an opportunity because these kind of devices are affordable today, that they can monitor their radon concentrations ongoingly from that point forward. And then there's another situation. So you know from experience, if you've been doing testing, that you're handing out test results that are elevated, and that the client is going to end up having or your client's going to end up insisting that the seller have the home mitigated in order to close the deal. Well, in that instance, the seller is typically hiring the mitigation contractor. They really don't care whether the mitigation contractor is competent, certified, trained, conscientious. They are looking for the smallest price and to get a test result below the action level in time to present to the buyer before closing. So I would strongly recommend that when that occurs, that you explain to your client, well, okay, so they've mitigated it and you've got a test result, but how are you going to know the system is working from this point forward? Here's an opportunity for you to give your client a device, or provide them with a device that they can monitor their mitigation system for all the weeks and months and years after that to make sure that it's working. And there are a couple of situations where the mitigation system may not be working, even though it was working indeed at the time of closing. For example, perhaps the mitigation or clearance test, the short-term test, was done in April or September when the heat or the air conditioning wasn't really running, and the mitigation worked well. But in the coldest month of winter, when the stack effect is enhanced because of the temperature difference between inside and out, and Perhaps you've got some leaky return ducts down in the lower level that are sucking air from the basement, and changing that pressure relationship between the house and the soil, then the mitigation system is overwhelmed by the operation of the air handler, and it's no longer effective during the winter, or perhaps even during the summer. So you wouldn't know that if you didn't have a way to monitor it. And the standard, as well as EPA recommendations, say that if a home is mitigated, then you should retest every 2 years. But there are a lot of situations during that 2-year period where the system may not be working. A fan can fail, and the little YouTube manometer on the pipe may just be, in a obscure place where they put their suction pipe, and people don't pay any attention to it, and never notice that the fan quit running, and maybe the capacitor failed and never came back on again, and they're thinking everything is fine. I've gone to garden shows, home and garden shows, where I was working with one of our large clients last spring, and I showed up to spend the day with him, and people would come by, and he was talking to them about radon, and they'd say, yeah, well, I had my home tested 5 years ago. I'm sure I have no radon. Well, did you have it mitigated? Oh yeah, I have a mitigation system. I know it works. Well, when's the last time you tested? Oh, it's been a number of years. So here's an opportunity. I would invite you to consider. So if you go to our website, ecosense.io, you can join our referral club. There's actually a little menu button at the top, referral club. Click on it, fill out a little form. Somebody will get back in touch with you. We'll help you with a discount code that will track everything to you. You can give your clients that discount code. We'll set it up also with an automatic button to put on your website. If they click on that button and buy from you through your website, then it'll automatically track the sale, and you'll get your commission that way. But it's a great service, and I urge you to consider it.